Restoring Triang Freightliners to recreate a childhood memory. Back in the mid-70s, on Saturday visits to Eastleigh with my friend Peter, I would watch in awe as pristine Class 47s would stream through with long Freightliner trains in tow. I decided I wanted to recreate this in model form, but on a budget. In this video I show how I upgraded a set of old Triang Freightliner wagons to more modern standards, and how I removed or covered the plastic discoloration. Watch as I try 3 common household chemicals. The outer wagons of these sets had special buffers, and these old models don't have them, so I've asked my friend Paul if he can 3D print a set for me. He's been working hard on this project, and a future video will show you the results. I also show how I changed the couplings on the wagons. This video concentrates on the upgrades, etc. A running video will follow soon, complete with sounds from the time. Hey, and welcome back to the workbench. So what are we going to do today? Well, I've plugged a hole in my collection of rolling stock, and this is particularly important for me because when I first visited Eastleigh in the mid to late 70s, Freightliners hauled by pristine Class 47s would stream through at high speed, and it was a very impressive sight. I've always wanted to recreate it in model form. Now, if like me you don't want to pay the astronomical prices for the new Bachmann offerings for Freightliners, then these Triang Hornby ones are perfectly adequate. And yes, they're very sparse on detail. There's no handbrakes or anything like that, but they're perfectly adequate once we do a little bit of restoration and improvement work. Several things to do. Now, first of all, you will notice that we do have plastic wheels, and they put an enormous drag on the rake. So from Peter's Spares I've purchased enough to complete this set of 5 of PS33, and therefore is container, low mac and plain wagon wheels. They're 10mm wheels with the right size axle. They should just be a drop-in replacement for the plastic ones, which will be quite a significant improvement straight away. Another thing I'd like to look at is we've got all the old Hornby decouplings, and there's quite a gap between the vehicles, so I'm considering drilling out the rivets and fitting mainline couplings which will pull them in nice and close. I've connected some screws together to fit them onto the bodies once the rivet's gone. Now, there were no buffers between the vehicles because they were solid bar couplings, but at the ends they did indeed have buffers, and these don't. So I have commissioned a friend of mine to see if he can 3D print me a buffer beam that I can stick on the 2 ends, which would be rather nice. You could put buffers on the body that's there, but really, if you look at that wagon there, I think you can see they need to be a bit higher than this, so I need a buffer beam that sits and hangs onto what's left there. You can see on the real thing it's set up slightly proud, so that's what I want to look at there. Now, one of the first things, they've arrived, they've been used, they've been sat around, they're a bit grubby, but what we do have is this plastic discoloration along the tops of the vehicles, just on 2 vehicles. The others are nice, that they're perfectly alright, but these 2 have that discoloration, so we're going to try a number of methods to try and get rid of that. Now, believe it or not, one of them is baking soda or bicarbonate of soda paste. You make up a paste, rub it into the affected area, and it should apparently take off the colour. It's caused by plastic oxidization due to UV light, and it's just something that happens when the plastic's not particularly stable. These are old things, you know. They're perhaps these are 1980s, 70s. Well, yeah, they won't be a lot older than that, will they? Because I think it was mid to late 60s that Freightliner concept came about. And nonetheless, I think they're going to look superb once they're done, and will progress with the improvements stated. That one there just needs a really good clean up. He's very grubby. But first up, we'll try the bicarb and see if we can clean up these discoloured bits. So here's my bicarb paste, and I'm just going to apply it with a cotton bud, and apparently you put it on, rub it in, let it dry, and then clean it off. So I'll just do that and see what happens. Okay, so the bicarb has been applied, and apparently we just now wait for it to dry. I have to say, I'm not full of hope that this is going to do anything, but we'll give it a go. Welcome back. Well, as expected, it didn't really do anything. It did lifted a little bit off, but not much. So we ramp up the available domestic chemicals to white vinegar, and we'll apply that to the areas and see if that gets rid of it. So do you know what? The vinegar did lighten it just a little bit, but not enough. So we now move into more dangerous chemicals, and the first one will be clear bleach, and then I've got a cream cleaner called Sif to try. The only thing is, the containers have been glued onto the chassis, so it's not particularly ideal, but I think I would have probably ended up gluing them on myself, because it stops the chassis from bowing, because they're quite thin really. While I was waiting for the bleach to do its thing, if it's going to, I discovered that by carefully pushing a screwdriver underneath the bodies of the containers, despite the fact that they'd been glued, I was able to easily break the joint, which is great, because that now means I can wash and dry them, because they do have opening doors, separately from the chassis. All I have to do is clear up that little bit of glue patch, and then, as I say, I may well reattach them myself. But that's good. That's one good thing to know. Well, sadly the bleach didn't do anything. So the last chemical chance is there's some Sif, the yellow cleaner that we all know, and I'm going to use cotton bud and try that. Right, so sadly the attempts to use household chemicals failed, as I was kind of expecting really, because it's gone so deep into the plastic. So we are looking at perhaps overpainting it. So I'm going to have a look at some more photographs of Freightliners and see how they turned out. Now some of these are darker colour, they're grey, which I believe I could just spray over with a grey primer that I've got, mask up the Freightliner logo, and that would bring them back to looking good. What they are going to have is a good wash, as is the chassis, but that will just be fairy liquid and toothbrush, just to get any muck off them. Okay, my first job was to mask up, using masking tape funnily enough. The containers were taken out into the garden and placed inside a box and sprayed with the grey primer. While I waited for the paint to dry, I removed the old wheels, added a drop of oil to each wheel bearing and fitted the new wheels. Where are we? We have washed them, cleaned off any particular bad bits, the metal wheels have been fitted, and the very badly tarnished containers have been spray painted. There's an excellent photo showing the variation of greys on these Freightliner wagons. I'll put a link in this video's more information box. And yes, they're darker, but there was quite a variance in the real thing. So they now look really nice. There's a 5 vehicle set, this one. I think the real ones were 4 vehicle sets. But they're running so much beautiful, so much better than they were. Look at that. So I'm very pleased with that, and I'm pleased how the paintwork's gone. And there we are, that's where we've got to so far. Now to change the couplings. First let's drill out the rivets on the old ones, using a 3mm drill as shown to take the top off the rivet. Once done, the remaining rivet will push out easily enough, or with the help of a screwdriver on top side. Because we're going to fix using glue, we need to use a double method. 5-minute epoxy for strength and superglue for short-term grab to keep the couplings in place whilst the epoxy sets. These parts are nylon, so we will need to roughen the surface of the mounting bar and coupling to ensure good adhesion. Mix the epoxy and then apply a tiny drop of superglue to each mounting pin. Then add the epoxy to the middle. I found I could comfortably do 2 vehicles at a time. Press on the new coupling and hold in place while the superglue grabs. Make sure it's level, with the box containing the spring flat to the coupling bar. These couplings are still available from Bachmann, despite being mainline design. Stay tuned for the next video, which will feature a Class 47 and these lovely looking Freightliners running on the layout.